multiple times when he quotes the Old Testament. You must have done this.
Where's he quoting the Old Testament in?
I challenge anyone here.
In his letters?
If you look up Paul's quotes in the Old Testament.
In what book?
Hang on a second. In Paul's letters, when he quotes
Thank you. So that's not the Torah. So we went on a tangent to get to this point. Can you show the Bar Ehrman quote, please? Please, can you show the Bar Ehrman quote? You asked me what my point is. Now you don't want to hear my point.
No, I heard your point.
What is my point?
Let me speak. Right.
Yeah, but what's my point? Paul is saying Paul misquoted the Torah.
Yes.
How does he know Paul wasn't quoting the original Torah that you believe in? The fact that you're claiming that it has changed, maybe I cannot prove it hasn't changed, but you can neither prove it has changed either, which was his point. For example, I'm not sure what your
All of them. All 2 billion.
Say my statement that the Quran says Torah was corrupted by the Jews. That Jews corrupted the Torah at the time of your prophet.
Okay, is that a question or a statement?
Well, I'm getting your opinion question. On it. Well, no, because that's why I said I'll see what your opinion is first.
Yeah, my view is that the Quran does state that the Torah we have today in our hands is not the identical one that was given to Moses. This is true.
Okay, so when they, because Muslims will point to the verse where it says they corrupt the scripture. So I'm asking, essentially, were Jews at the time of the prophet corrupting the scripture?
Yes, because the word tarif in Arabic has multiple meanings. There's different senses. So there is a kind of a verbal corruption where you misrepresent or distort the meaning, distort verbally the oral meaning of the text. The Jews of the Prophet's time were certainly accused of that. There are various stories I can tell you about where they did that, according to the tradition. But there's also the sense in some verses, there's one particular, we use the word Mohaman, where the implication is that there has been textual corruption, sure, and also that they have forgotten or just completely forgotten the original revelation, which implies that it's been lost as well. That's my reading. So the tarif, the concept of tarif in Arabic is not just, it's multiple. It's not just one particular accusation. That's my understanding.
So my will be leading on from that. So if the...
You know this already. You've been around.
No, but this is my question.
This is very old stuff.
Yeah, no, but this is my question. So if the Jews were corrupting the Bible at the time of the prophet,
verbally,
and we have, and textually...
No, I didn't say that.
Just verbally?
No, but well, let me just nuance this. The Quran makes multiple accusations of both verbal and textual corruption. As regarding which specific date line that refers to, I don't know. I would need to look again at the tafsir and the Arabic. But that the Quran is clear that the Torah we have today has been distorted both verbally and textually is absolutely the case, and that's not controversial.
So that's my question. Was
when I don't know.
So that's what I was asking, because I said some Muslims when I speak, but some Muslims will say that the Jews at the time were corrupting the scripture.
Verbally, yes. We know from other narrations, a hadith, for example, where there's a verse.
I thought you said you're not filming.
I'm not filming.
What is that then?
Well, there's no microphone.
No, behind you.
Yeah, I know, but there's no microphone.
And you got the mic here.
Yeah, I've got a microphone here.
But you said you don't want to film me.
But
I'm not filming. I just came to ask him a question.
It's not him personally. The corruption that's alleged is verbal. In other words, they deliberately distort the meanings of the text. The text is there, but they distort the meanings of it. Or they cover up text. That's another accusation made. And the specific narrations, not in the Quran, which flesh that story out. But also the Quran accuses them of having corrupted the text and forgotten part of the revelations. So there's about 4 different categories of allegation, if you like, from verbal all through to forgetting to textual and so on. So it's not a simple.
No, that's fine, because I wanted, before I ask my other leading question, I wanted to get your position first.
Leading question?
Well, yeah, like my secondary question, but that's why I was asking your position first, because there are Muslims who will say that they were corrupting it even scripturally.
I must say,
but that's what I'm saying.
I want to make it clear, I'm not a scholar, I'm not an expert. My knowledge of Arabic is very limited.
No,
so
that's fine.
I could be wrong.
No, but that's fine. I'm saying there's differences of opinion.
There is.
That's why I was just asking your opinion, because I didn't want to straw man you.
Yeah.
So because if it was, my question would have been a bit different.
Paperboy, straw man.
Yeah. So I guess the other question, and this is what I was having a conversation with last week about. So essentially, the Quran says that Allah sent the Torah, and that the prophets were the protectors of the Quran, and the rabbis. They were the prophets were supposed to. If you want me to,
I'm aware.
Okay. Then, well, if we, for example, Jesus was, we know when Jesus lived, and essentially, he was supposed to be one of those protectors. So if we have, for example, the Dead Sea Scrolls, which contains obviously a very 99% accuracy with the Masoretic text.
No.
It's above 90%.
No.
What would you say it is?
The Dead Sea Scrolls, from what I understand from Professor Bart Ehrman, who has spoken about this, obviously he's an expert on texts.
Okay.
He says it's often like a myth, misunderstanding about the Dead Sea Scrolls. That some of them have been the standard text used by biblical scholars is the Leningrad AD. So are you doing something else?
No, I'm finding a quote to see, because you're
it sounds as if you're doing something online.
No, I'm basically find a scholarly quote where they give the accuracy, so it's not a
well, maybe the scholars disagree, but I mean, I said that
because that's why when I said 99%, you disagreed. So I was trying to find
absolutely,
a quote.
Yeah, because it's not true. Everyone knows that. The Dead Sea Scroll contains most of the biblical books, and some of them very closely resemble the Leningrad text, which is the standard text used by translators. But there are other texts in the Dead Sea that were quite different. For Jeremiah has a much shorter, or was it no? I need to check this, but it's not the same book. The contents has different chapters, additional or less, I forget which, than the one we have today. And also there are big discrepancies between them, according to Professor Bart Ehrman, who is an expert on the text.
Yeah, so I guess my query was to the percentage, because I said 99%.
I don't know the percentage, but I get the impression from Bart Ehrman that it's much lower than that. And there's a popular myth that somehow the Dead Sea Scrolls confirmed the Torah we have. Indeed, that he's quite clear that that's the case. It is in some books, but not in others, and they're radically different ones. But also, to use your expression, it's a moot point, because the New Testament writers didn't use that anyway. They didn't quote from it. They quoted from an entirely different book called the Septuagint, which is an often extremely faulty translation of the Greek, of the Hebrew Bible. And esteemed scholars like James Barker, Oxford, who's a professor of the Hebrew Bible, have said that in many passages the Torah has been woefully mistranslated, very poor translation. But that very wording has been used by the biblical writers, quoted, even though it's a very bad. So this would be an example of corruption, I would argue. The Quran doesn't say this openly or explicitly. I'm saying this. If you want to see how the Bible has been mistranslated and corrupted, look at the Septuagint and compare passages from that, which is the New Testament Bible, with the Hebrew Masoretic. But there are other versions. There are many. There's the Samaritan Pentateuch. There's a Masoretic text, the Dead Sea Scrolls, which you mentioned, and there are other canons, and they don't all agree. There is no single Torah that we know existed, and so when we talk about the Torah today, it is a scholarly reconstruction. We don't actually have a fixed, clear, homogeneous, unified text that we've always agreed is the Torah. It's a scholarly reconstruction. So scholars typically will look at the Masoretic, they'll look at the Septuagint, they'll look at the Dead Sea Scrolls, they'll look at other. If you look at the NRSV, at the critical apparatus at the bottom, it often tells you where this translation, that translation, it comes from completely different manuscripts. And often, credibly, we have no idea what the words mean anyway. Often they'll say meaning uncertain. We don't even know what the words mean. So when we talk about the Torah, it's a really, when you dig deeper, it's a really complicated subject. There is no single Torah. And just to reiterate finally, the biblical Torah used by the New Testament is often an extremely poor and inaccurate translation of the Hebrew, whichever Hebrew is used, and it wasn't the Dead Sea Scrolls, it was something else. And it results in faulty quotes. So you have many of the quotes in the New Testament are erroneous and faulty, and there's a brilliant one in Hebrews I can mention, which is used to prove a point of doctrine, even though the original Masoretic doesn't say that. And so it's a very uneven...
I mean,
I'm surprised that Quran talks like
points, and I listened. So essentially, because when I was looking, basically, so I looked and it said, for example, comparative studies reveal word-for-word identity in 95% of the text, or against the Masoretic text. With this
99.
90. So let's just go with 95. But you know,
So
with them,
who is saying this?
I've just googled. So I've just
Yeah, but who is saying this? You got to just Google it. Google is not a biblical scholar.
yeah, because I just sort of.
Well, can we stick with Bart Ehrman? Bart Ehrman is a recognised world authority on biblical manuscripts. Shall we Google Bart Ehrman and the Masoretic text and see what he has to say? It's very clear.
Well, there's many other scholars, so we're
I'm
talking
citing
about.
a scholar. You cited
Right.
Google.
Okay.
You can
So I can give you. Let me find the quote.
Speak up a little bit.
Yep. Okay. Let me see. So what I'm trying to do is find out the accuracy.
Do you agree with that characterization of Bart Ehrman's views on the?
I've not heard it, so I can't.
Yeah.
Can't.
Shall we Google that now? Let's be clear what Bart Ehrman is saying on this issue. Then also, I think the more important. The New Testament quotes the Torah. It doesn't quote the original Torah. No one should dispute this. It quotes in a Greek translation. And the Greek translation, as scholars have been well aware, although most Christians are not aware of this, is occasionally really poor and mangles or misrepresents or even mistranslates the original. And this is not a point that Bart Ehrman alone makes. It's well known amongst Old Testament scholars. So if we're looking for corruption, I think it's room. It's not like what percentage of the Dead Sea Scrolls is faithfully transmitted to our translation. The New Testament itself quotes from a Greek translation, which is often very poor, and it mistranslates, mangles, or even deliberately distorts, I would argue. I can think of one example in Hebrews, which is an egregious example. I'll mention it to you, okay? It's a quote from the Psalms. This is in chapter 11, where the author of Hebrews 11 quotes a psalm to prove into Christian doctrine, which says in this psalm, and I'm paraphrasing here because of the top of my head, that God gave his son it's the incarnation to inhabit, that God gave his son a body. So it's talking about the incarnation in Hebrews. When you look at the original in Hebrew, it says nothing about that at all. It talks about a completely different subject. The point is this is the standard observation, that the New Testament writers have used a distorted mistranslation to create Christian doctrine about the incarnation of Jesus. I mean, this is so central to Christian faith. It is based on a false mistranslation. So I would offer you that specific example for us to discuss now, because we can really hone in detail of this and look how the New Testament has corrupted and mistranslated they had at the time.
So well, I'm starting off with because my question initially was about the Torah, not the New Testament.
No, it's the New Testament quoting the Torah is what I'm talking about.
But my initial point wasn't.
Torah. There's a Septuagint, the Masoretic, the Dead Sea Scrolls.
Right.
There are lots of Torahs.
Yeah. So essentially,
it's complicated.
Yeah.
Your question didn't suggest complexity, but rather kind of a simple.
Yeah. So essentially, that my statement was when we have the Dead Sea Scrolls, and I have to find a percentage quote because it'll take too much.
I'm still waiting for it.
Yeah. It will take too long. So
I can wait.
Yeah, but let's have a discussion.
I'll wait for your quote because you've made a assertion which you've not been able to back up.
Maybe just as a parenthetic.
So I said essentially 90-95% it matches up with the Masoretic text.
I don't know any scholar who says that is very different because
I've seen
quotes along those lines
like that. Yes.
Yes.
Claims, yes, but I'm saying that scholars haven't said this.
I haven't delved into who was making the claims specifically, but
it's a common claim. You're absolutely right, but it's fake news. It's not true.
The Dead Sea Scrolls are viewed very differently by Jews in relation to the texts that they have, versus how the Dead Sea Scrolls
eventually
have turned out not to be.
I'll be here too long because I've been looking already, but I can't find any scholarly
we
quotes.
came back to you asked me about the Quran teaches about
Yes,
corruption about the Torah. I'm saying that one example, they're not given by the Quran, which makes the Quran's allegation, is the well-known example in Hebrews chapter 11, where the Bible misquotes the Quran to prove points of Christian doctrine.
Yeah.
It's a really serious point, this, and I think that's a good example. They're not detailed by the Quran, of what the Quran is talking about nonetheless. And I'm offering this as something we can talk about now on camera to discuss what the New Testament has done to the Bible, the Old Testament, because it often misquotes it. And there are many examples. And Paul, for example, if you check Paul's quotes, the Apostle Paul in his letters, with the Hebrew Bible, in a good English translation, like the NRSV, what is striking about it, to me, is how often he misquotes it. He doesn't actually have, he leaves out phrases, or he gives a completely different meaning to it, or he lops off a crucial clause at the end. This is quite typical of Paul.
Yeah, but sorry to interject, but my initial question, because I was more concerned with the corruption of the Torah.
Yeah, so that's what I'm talking about.
Yeah,
the corruption of the Torah in Christian writings.
Yeah, but I'm not at the moment concerned about whether Paul misquoted something or not. So,
this is your New Testament.
Yeah, but that's what I'm saying. I wanted to know about the corruption of the Torah, not whether Paul misquoted something or not.
The question is, did the Jews corrupt the Torah?
Yes.
Paul was a Jew. Okay, you agree with that, don't you?
Yes.
So we have an example here of an actual known historical Jew corrupting the Torah, and we have evidence in your hand now in the New Testament. And I can prove it to you if you'd like to check. We can do this experiment now.
So what is your... elaborate.
I've given you an example of Jews actually corrupting the Torah, and you say,
Paul was misquoting?
Yes, it's easy to demonstrate.
Right, so that's again, but if he's misquoting, I'm talking about textual corruption of the Torah.
That is textual corruption.
No, if misquoting something means, no, misquoting, to be specific, what I'm saying is Muslims claim there was an original Torah.
Yes.
And at some point, this got lost in history.
Well, that's not what I said. No, that's not true.
No, but
that's not true. That's not what I said.
I'm not saying that's what you. I didn't say. I
I
never said you said that.
No, you said
I said
Muslims say that.
in the general claim.
No, they don't.
Because
let's talk about what the Quran says.
Right.
About Muslims say.
Okay.
What does the Quran say?
Okay. Let's
four senses that the Quran talks about.
The first question would be: was there an original Torah?
We will
Okay. So then, right. So then the next question was, there was textual corruption at some point.
I'll briefly go through the four senses that I, as a non-scholar, I could be wrong, so I'm welcome Nazam to correct me if I get it wrong. The four senses that I understand the Quran is talking about is, one is the Jews orally corrupted it, tarif as it's called. And Paul, his own actions certainly come within this definition, where they verbally misquote or obscure or put their hands over passages. We know this from the narration at the time, that they did this. Yeah?
Yes.
Another sense is actual textual corruption. Absolutely right. Tarif and Nast is also included in that.
So my question was then, when did that part happen?
At the time of the Babylonian exile, were the Jews in Judea, were they in possession, the remaining Jews, were they in possession of a scroll?
Can I just finish up this? Because they were four. The third one is, according to the Quran, as an allegation made against the Christians as well, is that they have forgotten a good part of what they were taught to remember and to teach. So there's been a forgetting of the revelation as well, which is another form of corruption in my view, because you no longer have the complete version of the revelation. If people have just discarded it, forgotten it, it's no longer part of our collective memory. That's also a really important part of what I will call, you may disagree, I call that corruption. We no longer have the original text. That matters a great deal. The Quran claims repeatedly to be a muhaymin, like a quality control over the text that Jews and Christians do have, and to be have guardianship over it. So it can tell you where these texts, say the Bible, teaches something, we know that it's true if it conforms with what the Quran says. If it contradicts what the Quran says as the final pristine, uncorrupted, unlost revelation, then we know what the Bible says is a corruption. This is the fourth way, okay, that we can tell when it's false or corrupted when it disagrees with what the Quran explicitly teaches. So, for example, the Quran says, in my understanding, you correct me if I'm wrong, that Jesus was not crucified, although it appeared to them, the Jews, that he was.
And what does Bar-Arman say about that? Because you appealed to him earlier on as he's a sort of authority. What's his opinion on the crucifixion?
As a secular atheist historian who does not believe in revelation, he thinks that Jesus was crucified. Yes,
right,
absolutely.
okay. So do you accept that?
No.
So why should I accept?
Because I'm using my own critical judgment here.
Okay.
I don't slavishly follow scholars when I agree with
Right,
them.
but you appealed to him
to
to make an objection to me.
Do you know, because
as if he was some sort of authority.
And it's not an answer he would accept. My answer to that is, God knows better than Bar-Arman.
Okay, so why are you giving me Bar-Arman as an authority? That's my whole point.
On the specific question of manuscripts,
right,
he's a textual critic. That's his expertise. He was on the NRSV committee. He worked there with Bruce Mayer, who was one of the most
it's just an opinion.
God trumps Bar-Arman every time.
Okay.
Bar-Arman may be the most brilliant human being who's ever lived.
Okay.
But he's second to God.
Okay.
God knows better than Bar-Arman. Do you know why? Because God is timeless and has a perfect apprehension of everything that's happened in the universe. Bar-Arman is a fallible human being. And he has said, by the way, let me quote Bar-Arman to you on this subject. He says, all these historical judgments are probabilities. We cannot know with certainty, they're probabilities.
Yeah.
And he's right. They are probabilities, historical reconstructions. So he doesn't know for certain. God knows for certain because God knows everything. He's omniscient. That's my reply.
Just interject. So, because I asked you this question, I'm just going to ask more. I asked you. Do you believe at the time of your prophet that Jews were corrupting the Torah either verbally or both verbally and textually? Both. Okay. And the reason why, and you hear the question I would have asked you, but you had a different opinion, was this essentially because we do have, for example, the Dead Sea Scrolls and like textual.
But the Dead Sea Scrolls are not the same as our modern Bible.
Right. So when we get to establish, for example, what the proximity would be, my question would be: do we find those alleged changes of the Jews in any of the texts because we have some stability, even if it was.
But we don't have stability.
So yes, we do.
No.
Because in terms of the Masoretic text was one of the greatest finds because it highlights the stability of the Torah, which yes, it does. That's why it was that's why it's such a significant find.
It doesn't. Which Torah are we talking about?
Why
do you put
but I'm saying
over the Pentateuch, over the Dead Sea Scrolls?
I'm saying, but this is
additional Torahs.
But my question is essentially the same, because if a Muslim believes that Jews were textually corrupting the Torah at the time, do we find those textual corruptions in any of the manuscripts that we have? Because we should find. Like from the 6th century, 7th century,
it depends what you mean by textual corruption. I'll give you examples where we'll give an example of Paul corrupting the Torah, by the way, which is a really important issue because he actually literally distorted and changed the words, which is what the Quran accused the Jews of. But it actually says that in the Quran.
Again, I've said my argument is textual corruption. So if Paul is saying he's gone to the Sanhedrin, opened up the Torah and changed the text. No, he didn't do that.
Yes, he did.
No, he didn't.
Absolutely.
Okay, give me.
We'll go through the examples. The one I've repeatedly given you.
Because what he's saying is Paul would write
Can I give you the example? The example I've given, which I really
in Paul's
would love
letters,
to go into
he'll say Paul. Yeah, but you're saying Paul would write his letters and misquote it. That is different
I said,
from.
when you multiple times when he quotes the Old Testament, you must have done this.
Where's he quoting the Old Testament in?
I challenge anyone here.
In his letters.
If you look up Paul's quotes from the Old Testament.
In what book?
Hang on a second. In Paul's letters, when he quotes.
Thank you. So that's not the Torah.
Will you let me finish? When he quotes in the Old Testament, the Torah, repeatedly he misquotes it. He changes the words.
That's not forgiveness. Forgiveness is different from patience.
One example I gave, another one.
No, but he just confirmed my point. No. Yeah, of course.
But Nazim, who's a walking, can we look at the text that Paul misquoted?
Yeah, but
yeah, we will. Let's look at an example and we'll demonstrate how Christians have destroyed Jews in the name of Paul, who's the most famous Jew of the first century after Jesus. How he actually physically distorted and changed the Torah that he had with him.
What was his purpose of changing the Torah? Or what was he changing?
I can't look at his psychological motivation.
No. When I say that, I mean the text that you're referring to. What was the change?
Let's look at the change. We're going to look at examples now.
You're making more
Exactly.
You mentioned Romans.
Yes. Yeah. We've sort of diverted as well.
We're going to look at examples.
Because
we're going to demonstrate how a Jew.
But you've diverted from my original point, and but I want to hear what he says. But we will go back.
In Romans chapter 11, verse 26, Paul allegedly quotes from Isaiah 59:20. He says in the Romans passage, this is Paul's letter to the Romans, the deliverer will come out of Zion. He will turn away godlessness from Jacob. And this is my covenant with them when I take away their sins. And this is to do with the gospel, as Paul claims. When you look up Isaiah 59:20, it says the opposite. He has completely twisted the meaning.
But again, that's irrelevant of my point, because I asked for evidence of textual corruption of the Torah.
Yes, this is textual corruption.
I'm saying the actual. This is Paul's letters. So if he's misquoting or twisting it, I'm not even making an argument, because that's my argument is
why did Paul misquote it so bad?
If he was misquoting, he's misquoting. My point was, when was the Torah? Again, but my question was, when was the actual Torah corrupted? Because you agreed there was an original Torah.
I'm saying there are multiple corruptions and additions throughout history.
Right.
I've told you about the Dead Sea Scrolls.
So let me ask you a question. What Paul's quotation, do we find it in the Torah?
Yeah.
So the Torah, if I go to the Old Testament now, do I find his?
He's misquoted.
No. I'm saying listen to what you're saying. So if Paul's quote is not in the Torah, that means Paul hasn't corrupted the Torah, because he's right. That's not what my point was. My point was the corruption.
Our point is that
that's
what the Quran is saying.
If the Old Testament. But they're trying to muddy the water. But the point they're making is a non-argument, because if you could go to the Torah, that's straw man in my point. Yeah, exactly. If the change was in Isaiah, then he's got a point. But my point is that because you can see the difference, they haven't. He may be misquoting.
No, in that sense, you're right. But what I'm saying is that here we see an attempt to actually change the scriptures, which is exactly what the Quran accuses the people of the book of doing. We actually see an example of this in history. Now, there are other examples where we can't date it precisely, but we know because we have multiple Torahs that don't all match. The Samaritan Pentateuch is not the same as the Septuagint, it's not the same as the Masoretic text, and according to scholars, there are other Torahs versions which may be used, for example, by other writers, which we no longer have. So we don't have the Torah, just like the Quran says, that was originally given to Moses. We have different kinds of edited, corrupted, changed, forgotten parts of the Torah.
And this is where my argument comes in, and I can go to the Quran where it says the prophets were the protectors of the Torah. So therefore, and the priests. I can. Let me bring it up, because if you go to the tafsir, it also expands, and that includes the prophets as well. I think Ibn Kathir. So therefore, because my point would then come to the point of, if Jesus was alive, is he then using a corrupt Torah? Because if we have, for example, some of the Dead Sea Scrolls, and we can see the consistency in the text, because it's not wildly different, then
God will teach him the Torah, so that implies that Jesus learned the Torah not from the rabbis, but he learned it from God.
So what? So
that implies it was corrupt.
Say that again.
That implies that the Torah was corrupt.
No, repeat from the beginning what you said.
Because the Quran says in chapter 3, God will teach him the Torah, so that implies that the Torah must have been corrupt.
So did Jesus teach the people that the Torah was corrupt?
Well, for example, when he cites the passage from 1 Samuel, he says Abiathar was king.
No, but I'm saying according to the Bible.
That implies that Jesus is quoting a different Torah
But
from what 1 Samuel 15
yeah, but then if you're saying Jesus, but so you're conflicting two different things, because you've just said that Allah taught him the Torah. So then if Jesus is misquoting the Torah, how could Allah have taught him the Torah? You can't use two different sources because he said Allah taught him, gave him Jesus the Torah, so therefore it would be accurate. But then if you're going to the Bible and saying that Jesus misquoted, then
so the gospel writers are not eyewitnesses of Jesus' ministry.
But because I'm using your
Jesus disagrees.
Yeah, but
So Jesus of the Gospels disagrees with the Torah that we have present.
yeah, but I'm more referring.
A different version of that. You know when he says,
But I'm appealing.
Abiathar was high priest at the time when David was the temple. But if you look at the Torah, it doesn't actually say that. It's
So who's getting it wrong here, the Torah or Jesus?
So I'm appealing to the Quran. So that's why I'm asking these questions.
Can I share to you an example?
So can I just finish my point? Because I think you've lost my point. My point was, and if you want me to bring up the references, I can. My point was the Quran says that the prophets were the protectors of, including the rabbis.
Where's it say that?
Yeah, that's the meaning of it.
Can you quote from the Quran itself and not your memory of what it might have said?
Do you want me to get the? Yeah, okay,
That's
all
what I
right.
asked you to do.
Okay.
And while you're doing that, I'm going to share with you the actual quote from what is traditionally seen as a letter of Paul, Hebrews chapter 10, not 11. I got the chapter wrong, but the example is there. For according to the author, for this reason, when he came into the world, he said, "This is Jesus, sacrifice and offering you did not desire.
Give me
but a
1
body
second.
You have prepared for me."
Right? And then I'm going to look at the evidence.
After this, our discussion. Are you guys? Okay.
20 minutes into
Yeah, all right, we'll do it next week then. Okay.
And a body prepared for him. Now, as this Bible, this is a Christian Bible, by the way, produced in the United States, as this Bible itself admits, this is cited according to the Septuagint, yeah, but if you look at the original reference in Psalm 40, you see where it is there? There we go. The original says, the Masoretic text, the Hebrew says, instead of saying, a body you prepare for me, it has ears you have dug for me. Ears that you have dug for me. That's what the original Hebrew says, but this Christian writer has twisted the meaning. And if you look at James Barr, he's Professor of Hebrew at Oxford, he discusses this passage as one of the world's experts. And he says, in his view, that the translator has made a mistake. And as he's an expert in the Hebrew and the Greek, he can see where the author has made an error in the translation. But the point is that this passage, which supports the incarnation of Jesus, is fake. It's not real.
So let me just respond. So no, because I've got to go back to my original point. So
I'm asking you a question now. How do you respond?
We're jumping because I said he asked me to fight. I won't, and I'll tell you why. I'll tell you why.
You see, we're asking your question.
Yeah, I'll tell you why. I will tell you why. I will tell you why. I will tell you why I won't respond. I will tell you. Yeah, let me speak. Can I speak?
Yes.
Okay, I'm telling you why I won't respond first, because you asked me to read the verse. So I'm going to read the verse first that you asked me to find.
Okay, fair enough.
Okay.
And then you'll respond to that,
right.
Yes?
I missed it because I was looking for the verse, so I have to listen to it again.
Okay,
because you can't, because you see, they're not, because now let me read the verse that he asked me to read.
And then you'll
it says,
address this one.
"Indeed we sent down the Torah, in which was a guidance and light. The prophets who submitted to Allah judged by it for the Jews, and as did the rabbis and scholars by that which they were entrusted of the scripture." So here again, I'll just read it again. "Indeed we sent down the Torah, in which was a guidance and light. The prophets who submitted to Allah judged by it for the Jews, as did the rabbis and scholars by that which they were entrusted of the scripture of Allah." And this is from Sahih International Translation.
So the prophets were given that task. That's not how I read it. That's not what you claimed it said at all.
So the prophet, if I said I'll go into the tafsir as well.
No, I want you to look at the passage.
Right. So okay.
What you've just said.
So let's start.
Is not
Right. Let's start with the exegesis of the text. "Indeed, we sent down the Torah, in which was a guidance and light. the prophets who submitted to Allah judged by it for the Jews. So
I don't understand that English. Can we have another translation?
You don't understand the English?
No, I don't. The English is very poor. The translation.
Okay, I'll give you Pickthall.
Don't give me Pickthall. That's a Victorian.
Which one did you like? Which one?
Any modern translation.
Yusuf Ali.
Here we are. We'll go with that one.
Yusuf Ali.
No, that's not. That's the 1930s. That's exactly 100 years ago.
Look at this is ridiculous.
Can we have a modern translation?
Shakir.
Well, we would choose the translation.
544.
Let's use a modern translation.
Such as who?
Whose Bible did you read?
This is a modern Bible.
Such as who? Which translation do you like?
We've got one. Can we read it out?
Which translation is that?
Ali G translation.
Okay.
Truly, we sent down the Torah, wherein is guidance and light, by which the prophets who submitted unto God judge those who are Jews, obey the sages and the rabbis.
Is that any different
in
from
accordance
what I
with
read?
such of
Sorry.
Do you know what? Please read it different, right? Because Paul said he didn't understand that, which is exactly what I read.
Sorry,
out.
I was
So
interrupted.
please
Can
go
we-
to a modern translation.
No, because
right?
he put his hand over. I was trying to read it. He
Because he
intervened.
said he didn't understand it.
I
which
didn't
is
understand
exactly
your
the same as what I-
translation.
It's exactly the same.
Can we just back off for a second?
Okay.
Oh, you're the judge.
That's really it.
As they were bidden to
I
preserve.
understand it now.
Unity from someone using the New Testament.
That's a different
treatment of the
discussion.
Old Testament.
But that's a different discussion.
Okay.
Yeah, but that's a different discussion.
I have a question as a layman.
Yeah,
Well,
that's a
we're all
different- that's a
laymen here,
different
so we're
discussion.
having a debate.
But my topic is about
can
the-
I mean, why does this matter?
But you're a Christian.
I don't know whether you
Yeah,
are.
but that's a different discussion. It's a tangent.
It doesn't
Right.
matter to you.
So now how do you interpret that verse?
I don't. I would need to reflect on it.
It says the rabbis and the sages who were given the responsibility of preserving.
And what about and the prophets were judging by it?
Yeah, but it doesn't say that
So
they were responsible.
It doesn't say
So,
what you
right,
claimed.
so-
you misrepresented. Like
yeah, I can
Christians
go
do
into the
on
tafsir.
text.
But as I said, but
I'd
again,
like to see what the tafsir
right?
actually says.
Okay, yeah, but I'll go into the tafsir. But my point was, it says the book was sent down, the Torah was sent to Moses, which the judged by. So that means you had a continuity, which would have gone all the way to Jesus. So if you had the book from Moses, there's a continuity of something called the Torah, which went all the way to
Point.
Jesus.
I don't understand why this is significant.
Because you keep going on a
So
tangent,
what?
and I keep trying to explain. Then you keep going to Paul, and then you're asking me what's the
No, I'm asking you to
significance.
explain why this is significant. I
Right.
don't
So
see
my
what's the point.
significance is if we can actually stick to the topic and not go on tangents about the New Testament. I will get to my point. No, because my point was, which I've been trying to say for half an hour. Because my point was this. My first question was, did the Jews corrupt the Torah at the
I've
time
answered
of?
that. I've
I'm starting from the beginning, so we stay on track with what my point was. So then, after you said no and he said yes, I
said
then
there
went
were four
to
senses in the Quran,
yeah,
as I understand.
right. Then I then said in the Quran it talks about, because I was talking about this verse, but I didn't bring it up. So I was trying to reference this verse to say this verse
I know-
talks
I know-
about
we know all this. Moving
right.
forward.
So therefore, my point was when we have things like
Yeah.
the Dead Sea Scrolls, for example, and we see a continuity in the text with the Masoretic text, yes, a stability.
I disagree. And you
Okay.
failed to prove that. He said
And you-
99% is identical.
Right.
I asked him to do it, and he's failed to provide any citation
I-
from a single
I-
scholar.
I'll do some fact checking.
So
Right.
you,
If you-
you
right.
can't claim that.
Right.
You've not backed up your
And
claim.
please find if the differences as well, if it's wildly different as what Paul says.
It's some differences, some in others. My
Right.
claim is nuanced. Don't straw man.
Right, so you don't know.
I do know.
No, in terms of the consistency of the Masoretic text.
But I don't want to go into that. I want to go into my New Testament text. So
Yeah, but I had a.
let me respond now.
Yeah, but
Can
my-
I say something? You've been talking a lot in the last 10 minutes.
You asked me what my point is. Now you don't want to hear my
No, I
point.
heard your point.
What is my point?
Right. Let me speak now. Right.
Yeah, but what's my point? You asked for the clarification.
Paperboy, can you just back off and not interrupt for 5 seconds? Like, can you do that for 5 seconds?
You said you know my point.
I do.
Which is what?
And we've answered it in great detail.
What is my point?
And, excuse me. Now,
Let-
I would
That's
like.
not fair. You have to tell us your point.
Now,
Exactly, that's my whole point. He doesn't know my
I
point.
do know your point. You
What is
repeated
it?
I would like you to address my question.
Has he answered
You
my
promised that you address my question once you had read that verse.
If you know my
had read
point,
that
then you
verse.
can just say what my point was.
I'm not going to play your game and parrot what you want me to say.
No,
my
because-
question is.
No,
why-
you're trying
why
to
did-
you're
why
trying to
did-
go on a give a red
It's
herring.
not a red herring.
Yes, it is.
Let me explain why it's not a red herring.
What was my point is a simple
Let
question.
Me explain. Shh, let me explain. The accusation, this is very much germane, about the Quran's claim that he has repeatedly referenced that the Jews corrupted the text of the New Testament, or they twisted it with their words.
Right.
There's multiple senses of ta'rif, not just one sense, it's multiple senses. And one of those senses is clearly in the Bible, in Romans chapter 9, which I read out just now, where Paul, a Jew in the first century, twisted the Torah exactly like the Quran says some Jews did. That's an actual example we can verify. No one doubts that Paul exists. No one doubts that he did.
He's defeated his own point. Because Paul is saying Paul misquoted the Torah.
Yes.
How does he know Paul wasn't quoting the original Torah that you believe in?
Would you like me to answer?
Yeah, go on.
Let me
Yeah. Go on.
He thinks it's a very good point.
No, go on.
Paul was a Greek-speaking Jew from Tarsus. He spoke Greek. All his letters are in Greek.
Right.
He quotes from the Septuagint.
Okay.
That's the Bible he's quoting, not from the Jewish Bible, not the Torah, not the Hebrew Bible.
But how do you know he wasn't?
Because Paul,
see?
It's a lot of how
excuse
he
me, hang on a
knows
second.
Because
from your end. But he's actually
Hang on a
proving
second.
No.
Let me
Because
finish,
his
let me
claim
finish.
is there was an original. So I'm saying
Yes.
then, if there
We
was
don't-
original, how do you know Paul wasn't quoting
because
from
the
it?
original wasn't in Greek,
Paul
was
was
it?
not
He said he
quoting
was a
from the
Greek
original. We know
But
that.
we know
because
factually
Paul-
and historically-
Dude, let me finish. We know Paul's not quoting the original because he's quoting from the Septuagint. If you don't believe me, see what the scholars here say. This is the NRSV, which is the main academic translation.
That doesn't help you.
It has no value for you.
That doesn't help you.
Okay, it says Paul quotes from the Septuagint. The author follows the Septuagint text. So he's not quoting from the Hebrew original anyway. But what he does, even in the
How do you know what's in the original?
version, he changes that.
But this is the point. How does he know what's in the original?
Because the Hebrew Bible that existed at the time of Paul,
Okay.
like the Masoretic text,
Right.
is different from the Septuagint.
But how do you know the Masoretic isn't the original?
How do we know that it is?
So you're making a claim that it's changed. So that's why I'm saying your point is a
no, it's
non-starter.
not. Let me explain
Because
how.
you would have to say,
I know the answer now.
right, go on.
We'll go back to this. The Pentateuch, the first 5 books of the Bible, are believed by, you believe they're written by Moses, don't you?
Well, they were authored by Moses. Yes.
That's what I just said.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
the same thing, by the way.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, Moses lived, what, 2000 BC, 2500 BC?
Yeah.
Would you be happy with that?
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll say 2000 to be generous. 2000 BC. That's 4,000 years ago, right? What's the oldest copy of the Old Testament that we have in the world that exists today? What's the dating of that, do you think?
What's the oldest?
Copy of the Old Testament, the Pentateuch, which Moses authored, according to you. I don't think he did, but according to you, the one we have is not authored by him. What's the earliest dating of the extant Torah that we have?
The full extant?
Yep. Earliest dating.
Off the top of my head, I know, for example, we have fragments of things, or well, not fragments, but for example, things, we have the silver amulets.
The Dead Sea Scrolls.
Yeah, I know, but I'm just saying, we have,
The date of the Dead Sea Scrolls.
is about 2nd century BC.
Thank you.
Right.
Exactly right. So, remember what you just said?
But he said, okay.
No, let's follow this line of thought through
Right,
very carefully.
okay.
You have agreed that Moses lived about 2000 or even earlier
Right.
BC. The earliest copy of that space Pentateuch we have, he thinks, in existence is 200 BC.
Right.
Do you notice the gap? What is the gap?
It's a big gap.
My
Right.
maths isn't very good. How many centuries is that, Nazem? Roughly. Sorry?
Roughly.
1,800 years gap between the time of Moses, which he said is the time of Moses, and the earliest copy of the Torah we
Like 3
have.
civilizations.
1,800 centuries. Now, are you telling me that this was passed down accurately for nearly 2 millennia without any changes, any corruptions, any alterations? The thing is, we just don't know. We can have no confidence,
Right.
zero confidence that the Torah we have today goes back to Moses.
Right.
Because we have no history.
So then
We
he
have
cannot
no
claim
Islam,
that there wasn't
nothing.
so that means he doesn't know whether it is or isn't the original.
We do.
No,
We
you
do.
don't.
No, I'll tell you how.
If you said you
I'll
can't,
tell
we
you
don't
how.
know, therefore you cannot say,
We
make
know
a
with
claim.
certainty. I
Right.
make that claim with
Right.
certainty. The claim is clear. When the Quran tells the story of Moses or any of the prophets, when it does do sometimes, this is the speech of God himself, who who being a perfect
That's a
omniscient
presupposition.
being
It's
knows
just-
exactly what really
That's a
happened.
that's a
And
fallacy.
Let me finish, because you asked me how do we know. When the Torah, so we have differs with what the Quran says about the story
That's a
of
fallacy.
Moses.
You can't
We
say it's
know
true
that
because the Quran says so.
We know the Torah has
Yeah,
been
go on.
corrupted.
Clear up one
because
issue.
the real story is
so
in the
Lawrence
Quran.
Schiffman of New York University, co-editor of Oxford's Encyclopedia of the Dead Sea Scrolls, says if the Masoretic version is the one and only true Old Testament, then the Dead Sea Scrolls are extremely good news for Bible believers, Jewish or Christian. The Masoretic manuscripts among the Dead Sea Scrolls are astonishingly similar to the standard
Which was
Hebrew
my point.
texts 1,000 years
Thank
later.
you. Thank you very much. You've got a
Proving that
quote.
Jewish scribes were accurate in preserving and
Well, Bart
translating
Ehrman
the
says very-
Masoretic.
Sorry, who's
Okay.
this woman?
The same Bart Ehrman that says there was a crucifixion.
Lawrence Schiffman of New York University, co-editor
Right.
of Oxford's
That's what my
Encyclopedia.
essential. So we went on a tangent
Well, Bart
to get to
Ehrman,
this
thank you for
point.
that. Bart Ehrman-
Can you show the Bart Ehrman quote, please? Please, can you show the Bart Ehrman
One
quote?
moment, please.
Don't. No, you asked me for a specific quote with evidence.
I will in a minute. I will
Right.
in a minute. But in the meantime, I want you to address. I don't want you to get away with this. Because I know you want to divert the
No, that's
subject
fine.
away.
Yeah, that's
If
fine.
we had the Torah
Right.
that you said was given to Moses 2,000 or longer BC,
Yeah.
and the earliest copy of the Torah, you admit yourself, is just 2 centuries BC, how can you know, or any, that the Torah we have now is not being changed or corrupted in any way? There's 1,800 years difference according to your own calculation.
Right.
How would you address that?
Well, there's two ways of addressing that. So one, it then removes the claim that Paul can make and say there was an original Torah, because by his own words, he doesn't know either. So therefore, when we look at the Dead Sea Scrolls, firstly, he will say before, but at least we can see a stability in the text from 2 BC until the Masoretic text, which is about 10th century. So a 1,000-year period, there's a very, very small disagreements, which Paul said actually, according to Bartman, there was loads. So in terms of
1,000 years is a long time.
exactly. So now he's talking about 2,000 years.
Coming back
so,
to the 2,000-year gap in records, how do we know it's reliable?
So now, in terms of the reliability, in terms of the text, can we know if there were any changes?
He just asked you, what do you think?
Yeah.
How do we know
Yeah, I know,
that-
I'm gonna
how
get
can
to
we
that.
know a text
Right.
allegedly was transmitted without any evidence for nearly 2,000
Right.
years.
So this is where
was preserved reliably and
right.
authentically intact.
So
how can we
so
know
in
that?
terms
That's my
of
question
in
to you.
terms of what the Bible, when I say the Bible, the Old Testament narrates, we have something called historical criticism, which the Quran doesn't have. Now, we then look at the reliability of some of the stories that it relays. So, for example, it makes claims about David. We find archaeological
Is there a
evidence.
system to doing this?
No, in terms of the
Or
text.
just every individual chooses himself?
No, but listen to what I'm saying. Yes. Wait. Yes. Right. So what I'm saying, I'm saying this in terms of the textual reliability, because we don't have anything earlier, we have nothing to compare it to.
Right.
So therefore,
So we
we
can't
can only base it on the evidence that we do have.
What
And
evidence
when
is
we
that?
have the Dead Sea Scrolls, which he quoted to the Masoretic
that's
text,
just
which is
200
a 1,000-year period, and as he said, it's the similarity is almost exactly the same. It's very similar in the text, so we see a stability.
doesn't agree with
So that's why I said if the Jews were corrupting the Torah in the time of your prophet, but we have a text that is stable, where were those changes in those in the Torah at that time? We don't see it in the Masoretic text. We see a stability in the text, so therefore, the claims in the Quran don't ally to reality or what we find archaeologically. Now, in terms of the reliability of the Bible, we also have things like archaeological evidence that validate many of the claims that it states.
For example,
let me finish.
Because you threw a lot of points out
Yeah,
there.
I'm gonna just finish on one point, and I'm just gonna show you guys something.
Also, you haven't really addressed the question.
Yeah, I said it. I said we don't have a
You don't have a method of finding out what
because
he
we don't have
wants to
anything
find
earlier.
out.
We've got nothing to verify it. But I said then the secondary method
to verify.
is to look at
Let me
stability in the
respond to that now.
textual
Let me respond to that now. The reason this is
preservation.
faulty is for many reasons.
Right.
One is that, particularly in the medieval period, Jewish scholars became very organised as scribes, as translators, as copyists in guilds, and they became quite good at copying manuscripts in the later period of the Jewish era. So I'm not surprised that in the 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th century, 11th century AD, you do have a reliable transmission because you had these professionalisation of scribes in copying. But you can't, and this is why you're saying is invalid. You can't say because it happened in the late medieval period. We go back to 1000 BC or 1500 BC.
But we do have a fragment. It's not a fragment. We have the. Yeah. Okay.
You can't then say because they were professional guilds in the Middle Ages, therefore we can use that and say throughout Jewish history it's always been like that. No, it wasn't. In the earlier centuries, there wasn't this reliable transmission.
Right.
To clarify Bart Ehrman's position.
After I've responded.
Come back to the second point is. It's bad news, unfortunately, for you. If you're going to rely on historical criticism, and I too, when I was at university studying this...
It's bad news for him because his claim is there was an original Torah. So the onus is on the person making the claim to prove that there was an original.
You're saying historical criticism somehow backs up your claim. It doesn't. According to most Western historians, Moses didn't even exist.
Okay.
He's a fictional character. The fact remains, and I take no pleasure in this, there is no archaeological evidence whatsoever for Moses' existence.
Right.
Zero for Abraham, or in fact for most of the early prophets. Also, there's no evidence that Moses or Israel was ever in Egypt the way the Bible describes it. So there is no evidence for this, apart from the Bible, which has a nearly 2,000 year gap between the earliest manuscripts and the stories that allegedly described.
To oversee
I don't think he was acknowledge the gap.
Yeah, and let me just address his archaeological point because you made some points. So now, in terms of
system,
yeah, but wait.
Now, during the 1800 years, that's all he wants to know.
According to your to Quran, it was the prophets. That's why I asked. No, but wait. Yeah, but wait. But this is why his argument. No, but listen. I'm going to respond. Let me make my point. This is why his arguments go against his own beliefs. Now, wait. Let me address the historical part. For example, not everything in history is provable. There are some things that are hidden in history, like Moses. But we have found something recently which is actually greater than the Dead Sea Scrolls, and that's the curse tablets from Mount Ebal. Now, if you don't know about it, let me. I'm addressing all his points because his point was right. Now, you see, he's interrupting. So I'm addressing the archaeological point.
What is the evidence?
Because so now Mount Ebal was where Joshua went, and Joshua was the companion of Moses. Now it says, inscribed on a tablet of Agan lead, the curse in Proto-Canaanite script was a legal document, says a team that deciphered it using high-tech scanners. So it says, let me just show. Yeah, but no, I said firstly. Wait. Yeah, but wait. Let me finish my point. You see, I listened to you and then I responded.
But this is not really helpful.
I listened to you. It doesn't matter. Let me land and then respond. So it says. The discovery of a cursed tablet has unleashed an archaeological earthquake and could be a key clue in proving when and who truly wrote the Bible. The folded lead tablet, which contains a curse on the inside, was discovered on Mount Ebal in the Holy Land, a place associated with curses in the Bible.
Do you believe there was a curse in there?
Yeah, let me finish. It has been dated between 1200 and 1400 BC and features the Hebrew word for God, Yahweh, in what could be the earliest ever appearance. If the dating is correct, it may prove that the Israelites were literate when they entered the Holy Land and able to document the Bible events as they happened. Archaeologist Scott Stripling said it's extremely important. Some are describing this as the most important find of our lifetimes because it predates anything we have before regarding the Hebrew scripts. Now, the reason why I'm bringing it was discovered this year. So the reason why I'm bringing it in is because his claim is that one, in terms of textual preservation. So I've already said we don't have anything earlier in terms of saying there's a consistency in the text, and I've conceded that. I've then said, well, the only other thing we can do to look at the textual preservation is look at the other thing we have, which is the Dead Sea Scrolls from the 2nd century BC and the Masoretic.
That's not a system. That's just an object.
Again, again, my point is, then you would have to concede that there seems to be, from the observable evidence. But again, let me make my point. My point is, if we have evidence, and from the evidence we can observe, there is preservation or stability of the text. The fact that you're claiming that it has changed, maybe I cannot prove it hasn't changed, but you can neither prove it has changed either, which was his point. So my initial question to him,
it hasn't been changed.
Right.
Can we just remember this in camera? You cannot claim that it hasn't been changed. So this means this is a really important.
Right.
You can have no confidence in the reliability.
You see, but this is why I started
the
conversation, and I asked him. With the Quran, no, because that's why you can go. That's fine. Because that's fine, because he hasn't addressed my first question, which was, if the Quran says in 544 that the prophets were to preserve the Torah, how can then we say there was a different one when we have the Dead Sea Scrolls? So the argument was for him to prove that it has changed, because therefore
whilst you tried to refute him, but what you did is, whilst you, in the process of you were trying to refute him, what you did is you admitted to us that you're not sure if your text has been changed or not.
No, I'm saying
you admit that, right?
I'm not saying. I'm saying. I know. I'm saying.
Yes or no?
I'm saying. I'm responding. I'm saying there's no verifiable way in terms of empirical evidence to see what was before. From what we can see post haste, we can see a preservation of the text. But my original approach to him was that if Muslims claim that the Torah has been corrupted, and the Quran affirms that the prophets were the protectors of the Torah, and we have Jesus, and we have the Dead Sea Scrolls which predates Jesus, then how can he claim that there was something different? So my argument was for him to prove, because I was affirming that actually if we have something that predates Jesus and the Quran,
whilst you did that, you affirmed and 100% admitted that you don't know if your Bible's been corrupted.
But this is the point.
So that ruined your whole explanation.
But my argument wasn't that. My point was for a Muslim to prove, to validate.
How can you be down here preaching Christianity?
No, but this is my point.
How can you be preaching verses you don't even know if they're corrupted or not?
This is my point.
We as Muslims believe all verses were corrupted.
My point is very simple.
You should mention Islam in your point.
No, because my point was to him. If Islam says my point was about a question about Islam. It wasn't about Christianity. So the premise that you're saying, oh, I'm using it to defend. No, I'm not using it to defend Christianity, because my point was to ask if Islam and the Quran says the prophets were supposed to protect the Torah. My question was, where is the Torah?
The original Torah of that time.
Yes, because the Quran affirms that the prophets were the protectors. So where is it? That was my question. So to say that I can't prove it, that's a straw man, because my point was the Quran affirms
Are you Christians, Eric?
Yeah.
So you believe in it?
Yeah, of course. But I'm saying my point was, if the Quran, as a Muslim, you affirm that
during that point.
Right. That's why I was trying to go to the verse 544.
In the process of that, in front of me, what you did was trying to explain that point.
Because the thing is,
I don't know if my own verses which I'm preaching here are real.
Because we're going on a tangent and a straw man. Because our initial point was, if the Quran says the prophets were the protectors, and we know when Jesus lived, what did Jesus use? That was my question.
You're a polite brother.
Right, cool. So clearly, just to wrap up, like, we saw a lot of straw man arguments from Paul and red herrings. My initial premise was very, very simple. The Quran confirms that prophets were meant to judge by the Torah. So my question was, where is the Torah? Because Muslims will claim, where is the Bible, the Injil from the 1st century? We don't have it. So that's their argument to say, well, it could have changed. But if we have the Dead Sea Scrolls, which confirms the Masoretic text, then we have something that predates Jesus, and they're saying their argument changes. Because, again, I'll just make it so that everyone understands. They will say, where is the Bible from the 1st century, the Gospels? But then I'm saying, actually, we have the Dead Sea Scrolls, which affirms the Masoretic text, which predates Christ, and your Quran says the prophets were the protectors of the Torah. So then if you disagree with the Dead Sea Scrolls, where is this so-called original Torah? So the onus is on them to prove, not to say, well, we don't have anything for 2,000 years, well, we don't know. And the second part is, which I would debate any Muslim on, is historical criticism of the Quran versus the Bible. We cannot find any archaeological evidence that validates the Quran. Give us archaeological evidence for Mecca. Where is the original Injil? Where is the original Torah? But that's why I read out about the cursed tablets, which is now deemed as one of the greatest finds in biblical history, because now it gives a new timeline as to when the Israelites could write Hebrew. And it has the oldest writing of the name Yahweh, which dates to about 1400 BC. So we know the Bible is reliable because it talks about many things that we can find archaeologically, even though we don't have a physical textual tradition. So clearly we saw Paul strawman in a lot of time, going on tangents, and we even saw, do you still have the quote from Bart Ehrman, just to conclude?
The quote from Bart Ehrman supports and negates their in different ways. He said on Bart Ehrman's personal blog, he says the Hebrew Bible or the Christian Old Testament was his secondary field in his PhD program, but then he goes on to say, I'm by no means an expert.
Right. So you quoted an expert before.
He was claiming Bart Ehrman was an expert.
Right,
Bart
okay.
Ehrman himself is saying he's not an expert.
Okay, right. So
but he goes on to say the situation, in terms of preservation, the situation is much, much worse for the Hebrew Bible even than the New Testament.
Okay. So he doesn't give any clarification.
So he accurately characterized Bart Ehrman's position,
right.
But Bart Ehrman himself says he's not an expert.
Right, and he doesn't give any clarification. Well, you quoted someone different. But so on that note, that's the end of the argument. And we clearly see a lot of straw men.